new compared to most of us, but they have made a significant progress in last few years. So they're actively actually they're doing Bhakti Shastri course and always engaged in chanting and so many things. And Prabhuji, as you know, that he's involved in some menial service in the temple. Like behind the scenes, he does so many things, coordinating the volunteers, coordinating the festivals, and wherever things are not in proper shape, he just jumps in and takes care of it. So especially on Sundays, many volunteers are required. So wonderful service. So let's thank His Grace Nandan Acarya. Go with loud Haribol. So before I ask Nandan Acarya to speak tonight, so tonight around 5:45 p.m., which is roughly around 35 40 minutes from now, we have a group from here. These kids, all these kids are actually born blind. So they cannot see, but they come here every year, or they haven't come here since pandemic. So we see a lot of these kids. They are blind, but they would like to perform something for the pleasure of Odinka, for the pleasure of Lord Krishna. So they do a dance, actually very complex dance in spite of being blind. And on Vision today, okay, oh, the girls who are doing dance, they are all married. So, I know they did an excellent dance last few years. Okay, so tonight they will be doing bhajan, and some of them will be playing Mridanga or the tabla kartal. So please encourage them, and for the end of that, they will probably ask for some donations or other cash donations. Okay? Welcome. Thank you so much. So without further ado, so let's welcome His Grace Nandan Acarya. Louder, Igor. So we will be doing that at 5:45 p.m. The dance and the bhajan in that area. So I will give an indication so that time please clear that area. Yeah, I'll do that. I'll do that.
Hare Krishna, everyone. Welcome to our Sunday Feast program. I'll try to keep it slightly shorter this time because of the other program. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Adhyanatirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prashtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pacharine Nirvishesha Shriyavadi Ashyata Deshatarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasali Gaura Bhakta Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Okay, thank you again for coming to the feast program. So firstly, just like to thank Nilamani Prabhu for giving me the opportunity to speak. As usual, I have zero qualification to speak on this topic, but I do so for my own purification. So today's topic, I will talk about Sukriti. This is a class I actually did in my Bhakti Bridge like a long time ago, so I'm just doing this again. I think it's an interesting topic. So what is Sukriti? Don't look at the slide. Okay, so Sukriti is piety. So, and in Bhagavad Gita, there's a verse, Bhagavad Gita, verse 7.16. And I have it up here on the slide, so feel free to chant along with me. And it talks about the 4 kinds of pious people. Chaturvida bhajante mam jana sukritino arjuna ato jigna shuratati jani sa bharata sabha. Translation: all among the Bharatas, 4 kinds of pious men begin to render devotional service unto me: the distressed, the desirer of wealth, the inquisitive, and he who is searching for knowledge of the absolute truth. As it says there on the slide, these people, they adhere to the regulative principles and the scriptures, and they have material desires just like everyone else, but the reason that they're pious is that they go to the Supreme Lord, Lord Krishna, in order to satisfy those desires or to request those desires to be fulfilled. So they go to the Lord for distress, relief from distress, for wealth, for knowledge, and for liberation, and therefore they are called pious people. Okay, so just drilling in more into these 4 types of people. So Artha are those pious souls who reach out to Krishna in distress. So they want relief from distress. So the example given there is Gajendra. So most people must be knowing the story of Gajendra, the elephant. He was trapped in the clutches of the crocodile, and he was on his way to the next life because the crocodile was about to kill him. And at that point, he starts these wonderful prayers to Lord Vishnu, and Lord Vishnu comes and saves him. Secondly, Arthati, those who come to the Lord for material gain, such as land, money, etc. So Dhruv Maharaj is the well-known example, right? Dhruv Maharaj, as many of you know, he was a very small boy, 5-year-old. He wanted a kingdom that was greater than his grandfather's kingdom, his grandfather being Lord Brahma, right, the creator of the universe. So he wanted a kingdom greater than that. So he approached, firstly, he approached Narad Muni, but then Narad Muni instructed him to go to the forest and meditate upon Lord Vishnu. Thirdly, Jignashu, these are the inquisitive people. So they approach Krishna in order to understand what is the soul, how to become self-realized, and so on. And the example is given in Shaunaka Rishi. And then lastly, Jnani. Jnani is somebody who approaches the Lord in order to gain knowledge, and the ultimate purpose of it is to gain liberation. So the difference there with the Jnani as opposed to the other 3 is that the Jnani is said to be is the highest, right? And I'll talk about that in a second. But the Jnani, Krishna says, is the best of those 4 because he's not seeking anything material. He's seeking liberation, which is a spiritual thing. And in the next verse, 7.15, Lord Krishna describes the opposite, right? The Duskritinas, the sinful people, or otherwise known as miscreants. So the verse is Namam Duskritino Muda Prapadyante Naradama Mayaya Patagyana Ashuram Bhavam Ashitaha. So the translation is those miscreants who are foolish, grossly foolish, who are lowest among mankind, whose knowledge is stolen by illusion, and who partake of atheistic nature of demons do not surrender unto me. So the main difference here between the pious and the impious is that the pious go, believe in the Lord and then want to go to the Lord to satisfy their needs or whatever their desires are. The impious are atheistic. Generally, and they're kind of inimical to the Lord. So therefore, Lord Krishna describes them as the Duskritina or miscreant. So the kriti, so the word like in Sukriti, kriti means meritorious, and Duskriti means miscreant. And the reason that they miscreant is that they misuse their merits. Everyone has some sort of merits that they have to their name, and they misuse those merits. And the example is given like of a thief. Right? So a thief may have the merit of having a very good brain, good intelligence, but he misuses that intelligence in order to devise schemes of how to rob people, right? Rather than using it for good, uses it to come up with ways to cheat. Right? So that's why a thief would be a duskrit. So so now talking about pious people are good in that they go to the Lord for their desires, but they're not considered pure devotees. And when we talk about pure devotees, we have to refer to Nectar of Devotion. Nectar of Devotion is a book, a sort of English translation of Bhakti Rasa Amrita Sindhu, which is written by Srila Rupa Goswami. So in that book, there is a definition of pure devotional service. So the verse here is Anyabilashita sunyam jnana karmadi anavritam anukulyena Krishna anu shilanam bhakti uttama. Many of you must have heard this verse before, but it's basically a definition of pure devotional service. So the translation there is one should render transcendental loving service to the Supreme Lord Krishna favorably and without desire for material profit or gain through fruitive activities or philosophical speculation. Now, the key words here are favorable, and so I'll just start with that, right? So, if you consider somebody like Kamsa, Shishupal, they were also always thinking about Krishna, like day and night. Right? In one sense, you could say they were great devotees because what they were thinking of was Krishna. But were they thinking of him favorably? No, right? They were thinking of him in hatred or fear. But here in this definition, it says favorably, right? So therefore, under that category, you have to consider, people like Mother Yashoda or the gopis, right? They were always thinking, how can I please Krishna? How can I serve Krishna? So a pure devotee cannot be somebody like, like Shishupal, right? He's automatically excluded. So the other thing mentioned here is fruitive activities and philosophical speculation. So the reason why the other four pious people that we talked about, they don't come under pure devotee, is because they have either material desires or they come under the category of philosophical speculators. So the jnani, right? The jnani, even though his goal is spiritual, he wants liberation, he's thinking about that goal, right? He's not thinking, how can I please Krishna? So in this definition, we see that the pure devotee is looking to serve the Lord. He doesn't have any own selfish desires, whether they be spiritual or material. He's thinking, how can I serve Krishna? How can I make Krishna happy? That's the only desire of the pure devotee. Therefore, all of those four pious people do not come under the category of pure devotee. Okay, so then the next slide here says piety alone does not lead to pure devotional service. So just because you're pious doesn't mean you automatically become a pure devotee. So as it says here in this first bullet, there's in Chaitanya Charitamrita, Lord Chaitanya had a discussion with Ramananda Roy, and Lord Chaitanya said that pure devotional service cannot be achieved by even millions of years of pious activities. He says one must have an intense desire or greed to achieve it. And the four types of people, they do not automatically qualify for pure devotional service. But, and this is the very, very key thing, right? Once they come into contact with either the Lord or a pure devotee of the Lord, then they have a chance to go to the next level. They have a chance to lose their material desires so that they can progress spiritually. And I have three pictures here. You see, the first one is Dhruv Maharaj. So as I mentioned before, he went to the forest. He wanted to meditate upon Lord Vishnu. His goal was to have a kingdom greater than that of his grandfather, Lord Brahma. and he performs such severe austerities. He wouldn't even, like, he would slowly stop his eating. At one point, he was eating every other day, then every few days, and then he was just drinking a little bit of water. Then ultimately, I think he wasn't even eating anything. He was just living off the air. I mean, such severe austerities, and ultimately, Lord Vishnu became pleased with him. Lord Vishnu came to him, and as soon as Lord Vishnu appeared before him, he lost all the material desires that he had previously to have a great kingdom. He said something, along the lines that whatever he was aspiring for was worthless, because now he has achieved Lord Vishnu. Lord Vishnu is much more valuable than anything material that he could ever achieve. So just by that contact with the Lord, he got that that he lost his material desires and he became a pure devotee. Next, there is Narad Muni. Narad Muni, as we know, he lived with his mother, and they would serve the devotees that would come, the sages who would come to congregate, and so they would serve them together, and then he would also eat the remnants of the prasadam that they would leave behind. And in this way, he slowly became purified. And see, therefore, in this example, by contact with the pure devotees, Narad Muni became purified, and he reached the topmost goal. And then lastly, there are the Kumaras, four Kumaras, right? Uh, Four Kumaras were uh, sons of Lord Brahma, and Lord Brahma's goal for them was to increase the population of the universe, but they did not have any interest in doing that. They wanted to go on a spiritual path, and they were initially they were very they were following an impersonalistic philosophy. But just by coming into contact with Lord Krishna and smelling the aroma from his lotus feet, the smell of tulsi and saffron, they just became converted into pure devotees. Just by that, not even through a discussion, just by the being face to face with the Lord and kind of smelling the aroma from his feet. So Sukriti, or pious credits, can be broken down into sort of three subcategories. One is Bhoga Unmukhi Sukriti. So the goal of this type of pious credit is to gain material opulences. For example, wealth or life on the higher heavenly planets, and so on, right? And the way to achieve that goal is to perform auspicious or charitable acts, such as is mentioned there, performing charity or opening orphanages, or things like that, feeding poor people. Second, moksha unmukhi sukriti. So the goal of this type of sukriti is to get liberation, or merging into the Brahman effulgence of the Lord, right? This can be achieved through the cultivation of knowledge. And lastly, the bhakti unmukhi sukriti. And this type of pious credit awakens the dormant love of Krishna that resides in all of us. Actually, all of us, our original position is to be devotee of the Lord, like loving servant of the Lord. But because of millions of years being in the material world, we've become conditioned, we've forgotten that relationship. So by performing or getting these types of credits, we can slowly reawaken that dormant love of Krishna. So the types of things that one must do to achieve these types of credits is mentioned there, right? Hearing about Krishna, reading about the Lord, chanting about Krishna and his devotees, and serving them. And then the difference between Bhakti and Mukhi Sukriti and the other two is that these kinds of credits are spiritual devotional credits that you never lose, right? In Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna says that any endeavor on this path, and the spiritual path, is never lost. It's not lost cause, right? You always retain those credits. Material credits, karmic credits, you lose them over time. You burn them, right? If you go to the heavenly planets because you performed a lot of charitable work in this life, think of Bill Gates, right? Maybe in next life he'll go to a heavenly planet because he does so much charitable work. But then once those credits are burned, he'll come back here. But with bhakti, those credits you never ever lose. They stay with you permanently. Sorry, just to mention these three if you want to look them up, they're in the Harinam Chintamani by Bhakti Vinod Thakur. It's a book. So now this takes me to the next level of Sukriti, which I haven't talked about, is Ajanita Sukriti. And that literally means that which is not deserved, or that which is unknowingly performed or unconsciously performed. So Ajanita Sukriti means doing these pious activities without knowledge. Here's a quote from Srila Prabhupada in bold. So we give everyone a chance to act very piously without his knowledge. This is the Krishna consciousness movement. This is a conversation between Bob Cohen and Srila Prabhupada. I think there's a book, Perfect Questions, Perfect Answers, where I think this comes from. But it's a very bold statement. You see that this whole Krishna consciousness movement that we are part of, that has been going on for decades and has millions of members. It says here, this whole movement is about giving everyone a chance to act piously without their own knowledge. Right? And then how does it happen? We don't, we see it happens, but when you first come into ISKCON, or you come across devotee, you may be performing Ajanita Sukriti, but you have no idea. So there's another nice quote there, I'll read through it. We are wandering in different species of life in different planets. Brahmanda Brahmite Kona Bhagyavan Jiva. One must be very fortunate to come in contact with Krishna and Guru. Ajanita Sukriti means just like Krishna's representative is preaching all over the world, and if somebody comes in contact with that representative of Krishna and satisfies him, he acquires some Ajanita Sukriti. He does not know what spiritual benefit he's achieving by serving the representative of Krishna. He does not know, but he acquires it imperceptibly. So when Ajanita Sukriti is accumulated, then he becomes fortunate. That is called Kona Bhagavan Jiva. So I'll elaborate more on this. So some examples of Ajanita Sukriti, right? Somebody may unknowingly assist Srila Prabhupada and his followers. And when I was putting this slide together, I recalled one story when Srila Prabhupada, he was first starting the movement in New York in the shop front on 2nd Avenue. And apparently, I think it was a homeless person walked in the middle of a class, and he had toilet paper rolls with him. And he wanted to just donate them. Even though he had no money himself, he somehow acquired this toilet paper, and he wanted to give it to to Srila Prabhupada. And all the devotees that were there in the room, they became a little annoyed because he was disturbing, and they thought he was just a nuisance. But Srila Prabhupada recognized that this person is just trying to help, and he appreciated that homeless person's gesture. He acknowledged him and said thank you, right? So, and that homeless person, even though he has no idea what ISKCON is, no idea who Krishna is, probably he probably wasn't even there 100% mentally. He achieved some Sukriti, Ajanita Sukriti, just through that kind of simple act. So the next bullet there is a real estate person who gave Srila Prabhupada a special deal on a soon-to-be temple. Executive of a printing company who slashed its usual prices because they felt kindly disposed to an old Indian gentleman. A supermarket clerk who gives devotees a donation of fruits or vegetables because they seem like nice people. Hearing the devotees chanting on the street, seeing Rath Yatra, purchasing Prabhupada's books, these are all examples of Janita Sukriti. So just by seeing, say you live in New York City near Fifth Avenue, and in June one day you see a Rath coming by, you have no idea what it is, you just see it. You've achieved these credits. And that is your key. At some point that will fructify and you will be able to make progress. That's why it's so important. We do this Rath Yatra everywhere in the big cities, all over the world. And the reason is to give this mercy to all the public, to the people. Similarly, people, the devotees, they go out on Sankirtan in New York City every day. It's for 6 hours a day at Union Square Station. You see like 5 to 10 devotees are there chanting constantly for 6 hours. Anyone going through Union Square Station, hears Krishna's name a couple of times. They achieve this Janita Sukriti. At some point, that will fructify. So, so this is this simple things that one if you donate for a book, you can achieve this, right? So that's why this is the mercy of the devotees. Krishna remains in that person's debt, on the last bullet, and will eventually award him or her the opportunity for conscious service as opposed to unconscious service and advancement on the spiritual path. One of Lord Krishna's names is Achutya, the infallible, because, as Srila Prabhupada puts it, he is never forgetful of even a little service rendered by his devotee. So you see Krishna's mercy, right? Just a tiny, simple act, he will never ever forget that. And he will record that, and then at some point, he will reward you in terms of giving you devotional service. So you can see how kind the Lord is. So Ajanita Sukriti is very valuable, is what this movement is about. But it's not pure devotional service. And going back to our original definition of pure devotional service, Anyavilashita Sunyam, it's a purposeful act, it's an intentional act, right? Ajanita Sukriti, obviously, as we said, is unknowingly performed, right? It's sort of imperceptible, accidental, right? But you're doing some kind of service and you're achieving the credits. But in pure devotional service, it's a intentional, very intentional act. Okay? So the quote there is, "As a fire burns dry grass to ashes, so the holy name of the Lord, whether chanted knowingly or unknowingly, burns to ashes without fail, or the reactions of one's sinful activities. If a person unaware of the effective potency of certain medicine takes that medicine, it will act even without his knowledge." So we take medicine, right? Do we need to know that how it's going to work or that it's going to do something for it to work? No, we just take it and it works, right? And so in the same way, chanting the Lord's names has an effect, whether we realize it or not. It's so powerful, the Lord's name. So it says that the chanting will be very effective. This is from Srimad Bhagavatam. So some more examples of Janita Sukriti from our scriptures. I gave some examples from sort of Srila Prabhupada, but now here's some examples from our scriptures. So the sage Maitreya, by accident, he came to the place where Lord Krishna was resting, and he came into contact. Ajamil, this is a very famous story, right? He was a very sinful man, and his whole life, he was doing very abominable things. But at the time of his death, he was all ready to be taken away by the Yamadutas to the hellish planets for all the sinful things that he did. But he remembered his son, his youngest child. His name was Narayan. And Narayan obviously is another name of Lord Vishnu. So the Lord's names are absolute in nature, meaning that they're non-different from the Lord himself. So he called out Narayan, calling his son. But because the Lord's name, he said the Lord's name, the Lord's agents, the Vishnu Dutas came and stopped the Yamadutas from taking um, Ajamil to the hellish planets. He was therefore given that second chance. And there's a book called Second Chance, if you haven't read it. And then he perfected his life through that second chance. And the third point mentioned there is Prakashan and the Saraswati. So he was a Mayavadi, but somehow he came in contact with Lord Chaitanya. He was quite respectful, and Lord Chaitanya gave him his mercy. So now, how do we get from unconscious performance of devotional service, achieving those kinds of pious credits, ajanita sukriti, to conscious performance of devotional service, janita sukriti? So janita sukriti is, as I said, conscious performance, and by conscious performance, there's a process of progressing in our spiritual life to different stages and ultimately ending at prema bhakti, which is pure love of God. But the beginning is shraddha, or faith. So that faith is mentioned here should be considered like a child or a baby girl. So that child should be protected and nurtured, right? So what are the things that one does to improve their or progress in their spiritual life? I mentioned here these 9 processes: Shravanam, hearing; Kirtanam, chanting the Lord's names; Smaranam, remembering the Lord; Padasevanam, serving the Lord's lotus feet; Archanam, worshipping the Lord; Vandanam, offering prayers to the Lord; Dasyam, becoming servant of the Lord; Sakyam, considering the Lord to be our friend; and lastly, Atmanavedanam, complete surrender to the Lord. So just to summarize here, we talked about there are 4 types of pious people. And of these, the Jnani is the best. These pious people, they are not considered pure devotees. We talked about what is the definition of a pure devotee, Anyabhilashita Sunyam. It's unmotivated, it's favorable towards Krishna, and it's not tinged by karma or jnana. Pious people can become pure devotees by coming into contact with pure devotees or the Lord, who awaken the desire in the heart of the devotee. And that is through the process of ajanita sukriti. This is the mercy of the devotee. And then next we discuss the 3 types of sukriti. And of those 3, Bhakti Anmukhi Sukriti is the best because it gives permanent benefit in terms of spiritual credits, which you never lose. The other 2 are considered material. And then, just to summarize, Ajanita Sukriti is the unknowing performance of devotional service, and that can ultimately lead to Janita Sukriti by following the 9 processes of devotional service. So I will stop there. Any questions? Did I confuse everyone? Okay, I think they're setting, yeah. Yeah, it's a logical step. Like, so the question is, do you need to go through, become pious in order to get to devotional service? I mean, the thing is, you don't have to, and there's examples that you can just go become directly, right? Like if you see Ajamil, right? He suddenly remembered the Lord. He was given that mercy, and then he was able to he changed his life. So he wasn't really a pious person, but you know, so it doesn't have to be. I think the qualification is that like you somehow by chance or luck you come in contact with the Lord's devotees or the Lord Himself. Most likely you're not going to come in contact with the Lord, but you may come across a devotee somewhere. Luckily, you buy a book, you get that seed, and it kind of all. It may not fructify then and there. It may take a few years, but at some point, and there's many stories I've heard where somebody just bought a book and nothing, their life didn't change. But then a few years later, somebody found the same person and they become like a very advanced devotees. So just from receiving a book. Okay, so if there's nothing else, I think they're setting up in the back. So probably we have to turn around. But thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Let's thank His Grace Nandan Acarya Prabhu for a nice, short, wonderful little class on some of the very important verses from Bhagavad Gita. So again, while we're setting up, one more announcement we actually missed. After Prasadam, we need, we are having our next fundraising dinner on December 10th. And we will be preparing the letters and mail out that we have. So we have a lot of envelopes, right? We'll be doing Yes, we have roughly 3,000 envelopes to prepare, right? So we need quite a few people, as many of you who can stay after Prasadam. We'll set up tables and things in the porch area. Or just we will coordinate that activity. We need as many people as we can so we can put those envelopes ready and prepare them for mailing this week also. So please try to stay and help us with that activity also. So I'm very happy to have Swami Nathan